What if I told you there is a mountain in California where people don't just get lost? They seem to vanish into the land itself. A place surrounded by legends, remote forests, deep snow, strange disappearances, and stories so bizarre that even experienced search and rescue teams have walked away with more questions than answers. Northern California, especially the region around Mount Shasta, Yosemite, and the Sierra Nevada, is known for its beauty, towering forests, isolated trails, volcanic peaks, granite cliffs, waterfalls, and wilderness that stretches for miles. But beneath that beauty lies something much darker, a long history of people disappearing under circumstances that often make no sense. Some were children who vanished only minutes after being seen by their families. Some were experienced outdoorsmen who knew the land well. Some disappeared near water, others in snow, and others in places where search teams claimed there was nowhere for a person to hide. And yet, again and again, the missing were never found. This chapter begins by focusing on Northern California and Mount Shasta, a region already surrounded by strange folklore, unusual events, and old stories of people vanishing without explanation. These disappearances do not appear to be a modern invention. The stories go back more than a century, beginning with accounts of miners disappearing in the late 1800s near what is now Gasquet, close to the Smith River and the Oregon border. These miners were working in isolated terrain where travel was difficult, communication was limited, and the wilderness was unforgiving. But even then, the circumstances were disturbing. They were not carrying valuables that made robbery likely, and the disappearances appeared to happen with little warning. If they were not robbed, and if they did not simply walk away, what happened to them? As the chapter moves into the 20th century, the cases become even more unsettling. One of the first modern cases is Billy Coleman, a 4-year-old boy who disappeared in 1940 near Viola, California, close to Mount Lassen. Billy was at a family cabin for New Year's Day when he vanished while playing outside. His mother checked on him, and only minutes later, he was gone. Searchers found some of his clothing roughly 250 yards from the cabin, including his overalls, underwear, and other items. The sheriff believed there were small tracks in the area, suggesting Billy may have wandered aimlessly. But why would a young child remove his clothing almost immediately after leaving the safety of the cabin? Why would he go into rough, snowy terrain without shoes or protection? Searchers spent weeks looking for Billy and reportedly covered the area thoroughly, but he was never found. Then there is Greta Mary Gale, a 30-year-old woman who vanished in 1947 while camping with others at Lassen National Park. Greta disappeared during the daytime, apparently while near the camp. Shortly after she vanished, her husband suffered a heart attack and was taken to the hospital, adding chaos to an already confusing situation. 2 days later, searchers found Greta alive on the side of Mount Harkness in freezing conditions, wearing only panties. Her shirt, pants, and other clothing were never found. Experienced woodsmen were stunned because Greta could not explain how she survived the cold mountain air dressed that way. The case is disturbing not only because she was found alive in such an exposed condition, but because the missing clothing was never recovered. That pattern, missing clothing, missing shoes, missing socks, missing personal items, appears again and again. Next comes Karen Elizabeth Nechtel-Marrow, a 27-year-old woman from McLeod, California, near the base of Mount Shasta. Karen was last seen in 1997 near a highway area close to the home she shared with her boyfriend. She was not reported missing until months later. Then, in a disturbing coincidence, Hannah Marie Zaccaglini, a 15-year-old girl from the same area, also disappeared. The two knew each other, and both cases remained unresolved. Law enforcement reportedly questioned people connected to the disappearances, but no arrests were made. The FBI participated in the investigation, but the women were never found. Then the chapter shifts to one of the most puzzling Mount Shasta cases. Carl Herbert Landers, a 69-year-old man who vanished in 1999 while attempting to climb Mount Shasta with two longtime friends, Milt Gaines, and Barry Gilmore. Carl was older, but he was in good shape, had climbed before, and was with people who knew him well. The group prepared their equipment and began the climb in difficult conditions, with deep snow and strong winds. During the hike, Carl began experiencing stomach trouble and had to stop. Eventually, the group split up. Milt and Barry believed Carl was behind them and would meet them near Lake Helen. But when they reached the area, Carl never appeared. They waited. They searched. They looked back toward the route. Nothing. When they finally reported him missing, a major search began. Search teams, helicopters, professional climbers, and canines covered the mountain. According to the search coordinator, the search was thorough and organized. But no scent was found. No tracks. No ice axe. No backpack. No clothing. No trace of Carl Landers anywhere. Locals had their own eerie expression for Mount Shasta. Some said it was as if the mountain opened up and swallowed him. The author connects Carl's disappearance to other high-altitude missing person cases, where people vanish in harsh terrain and leave behind none of the equipment they should have been carrying. The chapter then turns to Rosemary Teresa Const, a 70-year-old woman who disappeared in 2000 near Spirit Lake in the Marble Mountain Wilderness. Rosemary had been part of a spiritual retreat group connected to the Earth Circle organization. The group hiked to a remote lake surrounded by cliffs, steep terrain, and dense forest. After arriving, Rosemary stayed behind near the camp while others went on a hike. When the group returned, Rosemary was gone. Searchers brought in canines, helicopters, and rescue teams, but no scent was found. No tracks, no blood, no clear sign of an animal attack. Her lunch and lunch bag were recovered, but Rosemary was not. The search coordinator said this was one of only 2 cases in his long career where dogs never picked up any scent at all. Some believed Rosemary may have gone to a place called Devil's Back Canyon, but there was no evidence proving she went there. Her disappearance remains one of the strangest in the chapter because it happened in a remote area with people nearby and still left almost nothing behind. Then comes Jerry Lee McCoon, a 48-year-old rancher and experienced outdoorsman who disappeared in 2002 near Medicine Lake Road in McLeod, California. Jerry knew the wilderness, knew how to move quietly, and was described as a patient hunter who could sneak up on prey. He left his home in a pickup truck, telling family he was going to ride a motorcycle and scout the area. When he did not return, a search began. His truck and motorcycle were eventually found, and the keys were hidden in a location he normally used, suggesting he planned to return. Searchers covered the region with helicopters, dogs, horses, and ground teams. Despite all that effort, no equipment was found, no arrows, no signs of a struggle, and no trace of Jerry. Angela Fulmer disappeared in 2002 near Lake Siskiyou after leaving a group gathering and walking toward a wooded area. She was the mother of 5 children. Her boyfriend reported her missing, but despite searches, no trace of Angela was found. Authorities reportedly believed she was probably killed in the forest, but no suspect was ever named. Austin Sparks, 15 years old, vanished in 2004 near Montgomery Creek, California. Austin had been homesick from school and later walked into town. Witnesses saw him at a small cafe, making that the last confirmed sighting. After he disappeared, searchers tracked footprints for over 2 miles into steep, snowy terrain. The tracks eventually led to the banks of the Pitt River, where they were lost. Deputies believed Austin may have drowned, but his father strongly disagreed. He said Austin had never been in that location before and would not have gone there willingly. No body was found. How could a sick 15-year-old boy travel so far into difficult wilderness for no apparent reason, especially in winter conditions? David Clark Knowles vanished in 2006 from Sims Flat Campground near Costella, California. David was experienced, comfortable outdoors, and had gone to the campground to meet friends and fish the Sacramento River. He set up camp, but then disappeared after apparently leaving to use the restroom only a short distance away. His belongings, vehicle, and property remained behind. His friends and family said this was completely out of character. Again, the case involved a person vanishing in a remote wilderness area without clear evidence of what happened. The chapter then shifts into another California cluster, the Sierra Nevada and Yosemite region. Yosemite is one of the most visited national parks in the United States, filled with tourists, hikers, climbers, rivers, cliffs, forests, bears, waterfalls, and granite walls. But beneath that popularity are dozens of missing person cases, many involving men, several involving children, and some with highly unusual circumstances. The author raises concerns about how national parks handle missing person data, arguing that there does not appear to be a simple, transparent system tracking every person who vanishes inside these parks. And that is where the Yosemite cases become even more disturbing. One of the first major cases is Christopher Andrews, an experienced hiker who entered the immigrant wilderness with a personal safety transmitter. When the weather turned bad, Christopher activated his distress signal, and emergency teams tracked the beacon to a remote granite area near Iceland Lake and Relief Lake. But even with the signal, rescuers had difficulty locating him. When the weather finally cleared, a helicopter spotted his body at the bottom of a granite spire. Officials believed he had slipped and fallen into a crevasse, but why would an experienced, safety-conscious hiker climb to the top of an exposed granite spire in dangerous weather? Then comes one of the most haunting Yosemite cases, Stacy and Eris, a 14-year-old girl who disappeared in 1981 near Sunrise High Sierra Camp. Stacy was with her father and a group traveling through Yosemite when she decided to take a short hike to stretch her legs. She asked an older man from the group, Gerald Stewart, to go with her. At some point, Gerald stopped, and Stacy continued a short distance ahead. He later said she stood on a large boulder, looked into the distance, and then walked away. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. What makes Stacy's case deeply unsettling is not just that she disappeared, but how little was ever found. A camera lens cap was reportedly discovered, but no backpack, no clothing, no remains, and no clear trail. The area was open granite terrain, not dense jungle. Searchers covered the region, yet Stacy was never located. Even more troubling, the author describes his difficulty getting records about her case from the National Park Service. According to the chapter, Stacy was not listed in a public missing persons database, and when information was requested, access to the file was denied. For the author, Stacy's disappearance becomes one of the clearest examples of a larger issue. Not only do people vanish in national parks, but the records surrounding those vanishings can be extremely difficult for the public to access. The chapter then links Stacy's case to other disappearances in the same general region. Jeff Estes on the Snow Creek Trail, Timothy Barnes on the Murphy Creek Trail, and other incidents around Tenaya Lake and May Lake. The author argues that if these cases occurred within miles of each other, then the area should be studied as a possible cluster. Next, the chapter describes James Arthur, a 67-year-old retired lieutenant colonel in the California Air National Guard. James was experienced, disciplined, and had strong survival skills. He planned to hike in the Iron Lakes area near Madera County, but when he failed to return, his family contacted authorities. Searchers covered 3 separate regions, including remote lakes and rugged granite terrain. His truck was found at a high elevation, and he was reportedly wearing bright orange clothing and carrying a walking stick. The sheriff made a key point. If James had been walking around in that area, someone should have seen him. Yet no one did. Timothy John Barnes disappeared in 1988 while hiking toward Polydome Lakes near Yosemite. He was 24 years old, loved the outdoors, and was in good physical condition. He started his hike from the Murphy Creek Trail at more than 8,000 feet and never returned. Searchers found no evidence of Timothy, despite the trail being relatively close to the highway and in an area with large exposed granite features. Elizabeth Bartholomew, an 80-year-old woman from Mid-Pines, vanished in 1991 near her rural property. She had been riding a tractor with her husband and decided to walk back toward the house. When her husband later returned, she was gone. More than 150 searchers spent thousands of hours looking for her, with no result. Law enforcement believed she became disoriented, but if she simply wandered away, why didn't dogs, helicopters, or ground teams find her? The case of Teresa Beer brings a different kind of darkness into the chapter. Teresa was 16 years old when she disappeared in 1987 near Shut-Eye Peak in the Sierra National Forest. She had gone on a camping trip with Russell Welch, a man who claimed to be interested in Bigfoot research. According to the chapter, Welch later claimed that Teresa had been abducted by a tribe of Bigfoot creatures. Law enforcement did not accept this explanation, and Welch was charged in connection with the case, though the charges were later dropped. Follow-up searches found no trace of Teresa. Unlike many of the others, there was a named person connected to the disappearance, but still no body, no definitive evidence, and no real answer. Kieran Burke, a 45-year-old traveler from Ireland, disappeared in Yosemite in 2000. He entered the park alone, went into a remote area, and never returned. He was carrying a camera, but it was never found. Fred Clazen vanished in 2003 near Whirl Mountain while attempting to record audio and video of thunderstorms. Fred was experienced and had equipment with him. He parked near a trailhead and headed into rugged high terrain. His car was found, but Fred was gone. Later, his backpack was reportedly found in a location that raised new questions. Because the terrain was dangerous, the weather was severe, and it seemed unlikely that he would take unnecessary risks while carrying heavy gear. Michael Fisery disappeared in 2005 near Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. He had a wilderness permit, planned a hike, and then never came back. Searchers later found his backpack off-trail in a rugged area near Tiltil Mountain, but several important items were missing, including his camera, water bottle, and topographic map. Again, personal items are found, but not always the items that would matter most. Leah Oliver Good disappeared in 1973 after reportedly taking a hike on Mist Trail leading toward Vernal Falls. Some reports suggested she may have jumped, but the author questions this explanation because there was no clear note or final message. Her disappearance happened in an area where several others had vanished, making the official explanation feel less certain. Walter Gordon and Orvar von Last disappeared together in 1954 near Yosemite Valley. Both were educated, capable men, and Orvar was described as an experienced hiker. They went for a short hike and never returned. Search teams, climbers, helicopters, and other resources searched the area, but no trace of either man was found. Their families even wrote to President Eisenhower asking for additional help. What makes this case disturbing is that two grown men vanished together in one of the most heavily visited parts of the park. Donald Griffin disappeared in 1963 near Huntington Lake while camping with his wife and children. He went missing during a simple morning routine. Dogs tracked his scent higher in elevation, where searchers eventually found signs suggesting someone had moved through difficult terrain. The searchers were puzzled by how far and how steep the route became, especially for someone who had no apparent reason to go that direction. Donald was never found. Kevin Kline and John Gunn disappeared in 1967 after riding a motorcycle in Yosemite. Kevin's gear and the motorcycle were found, but John's body was later recovered in Yosemite Creek under suspicious circumstances. Kevin, however, was never found. One person from the same outing turned up dead while the other vanished, which makes the case deeply unusual. Jean Hesseltward disappeared in 1995 near Glacier Point. She and Mike Monahan had been hiking near a Sierra Club backpacking group when they separated for a short time. Jean never returned. Search teams, dogs, helicopters, and rangers searched for days. Dogs could not find her scent, and some handlers found this suspicious. Later, a body was discovered miles away in a small pool of water. It was eventually confirmed as Jean. She was missing socks and one boot, and rescuers struggled to understand how she reached that location. The author argues that the facts do not fit neatly into a simple hiking accident, and the FBI's later involvement added to the family's suspicion that something more serious may have happened. The chapter then describes Emerson Holt, who disappeared in 1943 near Merced Lake. He was hiking with others when he became tired and wanted to rest. The group continued, expecting to meet him later, but he vanished. The terrain near where he disappeared was described as a small bowl surrounded by huge granite walls, with only limited routes in and out. Park officials at the time reportedly described the disappearance as almost supernatural, because the river was not considered especially dangerous and there were no cliffs nearby where he could have fallen. David Huckins vanished in 1986 from Camp Curry, where he worked. His remains were later found in pieces in the Merced River near Happy Isles. The author finds this deeply disturbing because the case was not widely discussed afterward, despite the strange condition and location of the remains. Carol Laughlin's case is one of the most troubling in the chapter. She disappeared in 1979 from Camp Curry, and her body was later found near an old tunnel system by two climbers. The area was extremely difficult to access, and law enforcement concluded that Carol was a homicide victim. Yet no suspect was arrested, and many records appeared difficult to obtain. Michael Madden disappeared in 1986 near Sandbar Flat while camping and fishing with friends. He left camp, and later both he and his dog were gone. Friends found his car and equipment, but not Michael. Searchers found the dog later, but Michael himself was never located. Nita Mary Mayo vanished in 2005 near Donnell Vista Lookout in Sonora. She had stopped at a store, purchased postcards and small items, and then drove to a scenic viewpoint. Her car was found locked, with her keys inside, but Nita was gone. She was a licensed nurse, lived a stable life, and there was no clear reason for her to disappear voluntarily. Law enforcement used helicopters, dogs, motorcycles, and ground teams, but found no trace. Richard McPherson, a 10-year-old boy, disappeared in 1934 near Rock Creek after separating from other children during a fishing trip. His body was found days later under circumstances that the author finds confusing. Reports suggested his overalls were removed, and his body was only lightly covered. Kenny Miller, a developmentally disabled 12-year-old, disappeared in 1992 near Mice Meadows. He was with family when he vanished. Searchers found tracks, but the trail eventually disappeared. Days later, he was found dead at a higher elevation, wearing only limited clothing. Tom Opperman disappeared in 1967 while hiking from Yosemite toward Tuolumne Meadows. He was young, athletic, and well-prepared, but vanished during what was supposed to be a short trip. Doug Pierce, an 86-year-old retired engineer, disappeared in 2005 after his truck was found burned near Summit Camp. Investigators determined the fire was not intentional, but no trace of Doug was found. Walter Reinhard disappeared in 2002 near White Wolf, and despite being missing in a national park region, very little information appears to exist publicly about his case. The chapter then moves into a section on unusual deaths in Yosemite, beginning with Evelyn Consuela Roseman, whose body was found in 1968 near the base of Nevada Fall. Law enforcement believed she had fallen or been thrown from above. The condition of her body showed severe trauma, but the author questions the official reasoning. If she fell accidentally, why were some of her belongings positioned the way they were? Why was there evidence suggesting a violent event before the fall? David Allen Scott, only 2 years old, disappeared in 1957 from Mono Village near Bridgeport. His parents believed he had been kidnapped. Searchers later followed a scent trail up a steep mountain slope and eventually found his body more than 3,000 feet above the valley floor. He was found wearing only a shirt and one sock, no pants, no shoes, no coat. The author strongly argues that it was nearly impossible for a 2-year-old to climb that distance on his own. Orvar von Lasse's case returns later in the chapter, emphasizing that neither he nor Walter Gordon was ever found despite major searches. Godfrey Wondrusek disappeared near Half Dome in 1963 after telling his sister he planned to hike there. Rangers found tracks near the summit area, but no body was ever recovered. The author questions whether Godfrey, who did not appear to have climbing gear, could have safely attempted such a difficult route, especially with snow still present. The chapter closes by returning to the larger issue: bodies and bones found in Yosemite that may belong to missing people but have never been identified. The author argues that when unidentified bones are discovered in or near a national park, they should be treated seriously and compared against missing persons cases. In his view, if a person disappeared inside Yosemite and unidentified remains are later found in the same region, every effort should be made to connect those cases. By the end of the chapter, the pattern becomes deeply unsettling. Northern California, Mount Shasta, Yosemite, and the Sierra Nevada appear again and again as places where people vanish in clusters. Children disappear from yards and camps. Experienced outdoorsmen vanish from places they understand. Search dogs fail to pick up scents. Weather turns suddenly bad. Shoes, socks, pants, and personal belongings are often missing or found in strange locations. Some people are found alive far from where they should be, while others are never found at all. In many cases, the official explanations feel incomplete: drowning without a body, exposure without enough evidence, voluntary disappearance without motive, or animal attack without signs of predation. Maybe these are all separate tragedies. Maybe the wilderness is simply more dangerous than people realize. But when the same details keep repeating: missing clothing, impossible distances, sudden weather, scent trails that vanish, people disappearing near water, bodies found in places already searched, and searchers finding nothing in areas they thoroughly covered, it becomes harder to believe every case is just coincidence. California's wilderness is beautiful, ancient, and vast. But according to these cases, there may be something beneath the surface of these mountains and forests that we still do not understand. And if Mount Shasta, Yosemite, and the Sierra Nevada can make children, hunters, hikers, elderly people, and experienced outdoorsmen vanish without a trace, then perhaps the most frightening truth is this: sometimes the wilderness does not need to hide what happened. It only needs to leave us with no way to prove it.